If it feels like nothing is happening in your life right now, that silence might not be emptiness at all. It might be an ending that's already underway, just not in the visible, dramatic way the mind expects. Most chapters don't close with a slam. They close with a quiet, internal shift. The kind that makes the same streets feel unfamiliar, the same conversations feel thinner, the same routines feel like clothes that no longer fit your body. Psychologically, a life can end long before it ends physically. You can still be in the same place, with the same people, holding the same responsibilities, and yet something in you has already stepped away. This is one of the strangest forms of grief, because there's no clear event to point to, no obvious reason to justify the heaviness. But the signs are there. You stop being able to pretend it fits. You stop being able to force sincerity in spaces that used to be fine. You begin to detach internally before anything changes externally, like a tree letting go at the root before a single leaf falls. And that's why nothing happening can be the clearest evidence that a chapter is closing. The old life isn't ending because you failed. It's ending because you can't keep acting like it belongs to you. The mind often resists this kind of ending because it can't measure it. It wants external proof, visible movement, a clean transition you can announce to yourself. But the nervous system doesn't work on announcements. It works on truth. When an environment no longer matches who you are becoming, the body starts refusing in quiet ways. Motivation doesn't respond the way it used to. Your attention drifts. Your tolerance for certain dynamics drops. The effort required to keep performing normal becomes strangely expensive. You might find yourself staring at your life the way you stare at a room you've lived in for years and suddenly notice how small it actually is. Not because the room changed, but because you grew. And once you grow, you can't unknow that feeling. You can't shrink back into the same shape without paying a psychological price. This is the internal detachment that comes before visible change, the slow loosening of identification. It can feel confusing because it's not a decision you made with logic. It's a deeper intelligence withdrawing its energy, like sand slipping through your fingers, not violently, just inevitably. The ending begins the moment the old self stops fully participating, even while your life still looks the same from the outside. And then comes the part that surprises people. You may miss what hurt you. You may grieve an unhealthy chapter as if it were a home. This doesn't mean it was right. It means it was familiar. The nervous system bonds to familiarity more easily than it bonds to safety. Familiarity is predictable, and predictability is interpreted as protection, even when it's painful. That's why nostalgia can become a trap during transitions. The mind romanticizes what you had to survive, editing out the cost and replaying only the moments that felt warm or known. It will tell you, in a voice that sounds like wisdom, that maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you should be grateful. But that voice is often the mind reaching for the certainty of what it already understands. It prefers a predictable ache over an unknown horizon. Missing it is not a sign you should return. It's a sign your system is adjusting to the loss of a structure it once used to orient itself. Even if that structure was built from compromise, even if it kept you small, it was a map. And when a map disappears, the first feeling is rarely freedom. It's disorientation. Grief, in this sense, is not proof you're making a mistake. It's proof something real has ended in you. What is ending, though, is not your life. It is a version of you. This is the identity death phase, and it can feel like becoming no one for a while. Jung described a symbolic death as part of individuation, the process of becoming more whole by letting outdated selves dissolve. The fear here is not only of change, but of the space change creates. When an identity dissolves, the mind loses its reference points. It can't easily answer simple internal questions like, who am I in this situation? Or, what do I do now? Emptiness appears right before the new self arrives. not as punishment, but as clearance. Like a field after harvest, quiet and bare, waiting for the next season. The mind may call this collapse because it doesn't recognize the sacred logic of shedding. But the deeper sign that this is individuation, not breakdown, is that the old ways of being no longer bring relief, even when you try to return to them. The persona that kept you small enough to stay there begins to feel like a mask you can't breathe under anymore. And the discomfort is not a sign you're losing yourself. It's a sign you're losing the boundaries that once convinced you you were only that. This is why the in-between can feel unbearable. The void between chapters is where the nervous system recalibrates, where your inner world catches up to the life you've already outgrown. People rush this phase because they mistake stillness for stagnation. They try to name the next chapter too quickly, forcing new plans, new relationships, new identities, just to escape the discomfort of not knowing. But when you force a new chapter before the old one has truly ended, you often recreate the same problems in a different setting. The scenery changes, the cycle remains. The void is not an obstacle. It is a room being made. In nature, growth is not continuous expansion. There are winters. There are pauses. There are silent months where nothing seems to move, while roots strengthen underground. Your psyche has seasons too. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is movement that hasn't become visible yet. If you've been trained to believe that worth equals momentum, this stillness will feel like danger. But it might be the most honest place you've been in a long time. The void isn't punishment. It's the space your next life needs in order to enter without inheriting the old fractures. And here's the difficult truth many people avoid. Your new life will not accept your old identity. Not because you are being punished, but because the old identity was built for a different chapter. People carry old selves into new places the way they carry old keys, trying them in every lock, confused when none of the doors open. They change jobs but keep the same self-abandonment. They move cities but bring the same fear of being seen. They start new relationships but perform the same role of saving, pleasing, fixing, or proving. These roles once had a purpose. They helped you survive emotional climates you could not control. But survival roles become prisons when they follow you into spaces that require authenticity. You may feel this as a quiet inner refusal, a growing inability to keep rescuing, keep performing, keep smoothing everything over, keep being the one who carries everyone else's comfort. The internal decision that makes the new chapter possible is not about becoming someone better. It's about letting old roles die without trying to resurrect them in a more acceptable form. Because what you are outgrowing is not only an environment, it is the version of you that needed that environment to make sense. This is why fear often intensifies right before liberation. The mind will call it anxiety about change, but it is frequently anxiety about freedom. When you've lived inside constraint, emotional, relational, spiritual, even self-imposed, freedom feels like danger. Constraint is predictable. Constraint tells you who you are allowed to be. Freedom offers no such script, and the nervous system reads the lack of script as risk. The mind prefers predictable pain over unknown possibility, because at least predictable pain comes with instructions. This is the moment when control tries to return with force. You will feel an impulse to secure certainty, to lock down outcomes, to keep at least one door open, just in case. But the intensity of the fear is not proof that you're wrong. It can be proof that you're near a threshold. A bird hesitates at the edge of the open sky, not because the cage was kind, but because the vastness requires a new kind of trust. What you're calling fear may be the body learning for the first time that it is allowed to be free without apology. And that brings you to the last thing you may need to hear, not as pressure, not as a command, but as recognition. You don't need certainty to move through an ending. You need the courage to let it end without demanding it become tidy. Closure is rarely clean. Growth often requires unresolved endings, because the psyche does not always grant you a perfect final conversation, a dramatic sign, or a neat explanation. Sometimes the only closure you get is an internal shift that makes the old chapter impossible to fully inhabit again. And that is enough. You can trust the internal ending even if life still looks unclear. You can allow the grief without using it as proof you should return. You can let the void be what it is without rushing to fill it with old patterns wearing new names. If this reaches you now, it isn't a warning. It's a confirmation that something has already changed inside you. The door is closing not because you failed, but because you can't keep holding it open for a version of yourself that can no longer breathe in that room. Let it end, gently and fully, because your next life can't begin while you keep one hand on the past, pretending it still fits.
At some point, the ending becomes so internal that even when you try to return, you can feel the truth in your body before you can explain it with your mind. You can go back to the same routines, the same conversations, the same coping strategies, and something in you stays slightly withdrawn, as if you're watching yourself try on an old costume that no longer matches your shape. This is the psychological point of no return, and it's often mistaken for moodiness or ingratitude, when it's actually honesty beginning to win. Your system is no longer willing to spend energy pretending. The strange part is that this honesty doesn't arrive as confidence. It arrives as fatigue. Not the fatigue of, I can't do it, but the fatigue of, I can't keep lying to myself about what this costs. That's why the ending can feel like nothing. The drama fades, the appetite fades, the fight fades, and what remains is a quiet refusal to keep investing in what no longer gives you your own life back. When a chapter is truly closing, the mind may still bargain, but the nervous system stops believing the bargain. You start noticing that the effort required to stay the same is heavier than the uncertainty required to change, and that reversal is one of the clearest signs that you've outgrown the room you're in. This is also why grief can feel so confusing here. You aren't only grieving people or places or routines, you're grieving the familiar version of you that knew how to live inside them. Even unhealthy chapters carry a strange tenderness because they were once survivable. The nervous system learns intimacy with repetition, not with health. It bonds to the predictable shape of pain because predictability allows it to brace, and bracing feels like control. That's how nostalgia becomes dangerous during transitions. It doesn't remember the full truth. It remembers the parts that helped you endure. It edits out the constant tension, the self-abandonment, the small compromises you made so the story could keep going. It tells you were safer there, when what it really means is that you knew the rules. This is why you can miss what hurt you without wanting it back, and why missing it doesn't mean it was right. It means your system is recalibrating from a life of bracing into a life that will require a different kind of stability. Grief here is not a sign you should return. It's a sign the attachment is being released from your nervous system, where it lived long after your mind understood it was over. When identity is the thing dying, the fear becomes sharper and more existential. You can endure a lot of external change if your internal story remains intact. But when the story dissolves, you begin to feel the terrifying possibility of becoming no one, and the mind often panics at that space. Jung called this kind of transition a symbolic death, a necessary dissolving that makes room for individuation, for becoming more whole rather than merely functional. The emptiness that appears is not emptiness in the true sense. It's the absence of a familiar mask. The persona that once organized your choices, your reactions, your sense of belonging, begins to lose authority. And without that authority, the mind doesn't know how to orient itself. This is why the in-between can feel like collapse even when you are not falling apart. Collapse suggests something is breaking. What's actually happening is something is loosening. You are losing the identity that kept you small enough to stay where you were, and the mind interprets that as danger because it cannot measure who you will be without the old outline. But if you look closely,
There are signs that this is not destruction. The old comforts no longer comfort you. The old explanations no longer satisfy you. The old roles feel suffocating. These are not symptoms of failure. They are evidence that the inner structure is shifting towards something more honest. This is why rushing the void tends to recreate cycles. The in-between is unbearable when you've been trained to equate worth with momentum, because the void offers no applause, no metrics, no immediate reassurance. It's just space. And space can feel like free fall when your nervous system is accustomed to gripping something at all times. Yet psychologically, this pause is where recalibration happens. The body learns that it can survive uncertainty without constant control. The mind learns that it can exist without a fully formed plan. If you force a new chapter too quickly, you often choose from the only options you can currently imagine, which are shaped by the identity you're trying to outgrow. That's how people change environments and carry the same patterns into fresh rooms. The fixer finds new people to fix. The pleaser finds new audiences. The performer finds new stages. The rescuer finds new emergencies. It feels like change, but it's just repetition wearing different clothing. Stillness, when allowed to complete itself, does something far deeper. It exposes what you keep recreating. It reveals the hidden bargains you've been making with yourself. And in that revelation, a new kind of direction begins to form, not as a grand announcement, but as a quieter standard you're no longer willing to betray. There comes a point where you realize the most important decision is not about where you go next, but about what you stop bringing with you. People think new life requires new circumstances, but the deeper truth is that new life requires a new identity structure. Not a new personality to perform, but a new relationship with your own patterns. If you keep carrying the old self into the new chapter cannot stay new. It will eventually bend around the old self's fears, and your life will shrink back into a familiar shape. This is why the last thing you need to hear is often the hardest. The new life won't accept the old identity, and that is the point. It won't accept the constant self-abandonment disguised as kindness. It won't accept the compulsive competence used to avoid vulnerability. It won't accept the role of being the one who holds everything together so no one has to feel uncomfortable. The new chapter demands a different kind of presence, one that does not rely on managing everyone else's perception of you. And that demand can feel cruel until you realize it is protection. Not protection from life, but protection from repeating yourself. The fear that rises here is rarely fear of change in the abstract. It is fear of freedom. Constraint is predictable. Even when constraint hurts, it tells you what you are allowed to be. It gives you rules, roles, and expectations you can follow, and following feels like safety. Freedom removes the script. It asks you to choose without certainty, to stand without constant validation, to accept that there is no longer a cage to blame for your restlessness. That is why fear intensifies right before liberation. Your nervous system is learning a new language. It is learning that open space does not automatically mean danger. It is learning that you can move without bracing, that you can live without asking permission. The mind may interpret this as panic, but at a deeper level, it is recalibration. It is the body releasing an old addiction to predictability. It is the system practicing trust, not as an idea, but as a felt experience. Trust here is not optimism. It is the willingness to stay present when the old coping strategies ask you to run. And this is why closure is rarely clean. The mind wants a final conversation, a clear sign, a perfect moment where everything makes sense. Growth rarely gives you that. Sometimes the only closure you receive is the internal fact that you can no longer inhabit the old chapter with full sincerity. You can still show up physically, but you can't fully belong psychologically. And that internal mismatch is its own form of ending. The courage required is not dramatic courage. It is quiet courage. The courage to stop keeping one hand on the past as a backup plan The courage to let grief exist without turning it into an argument for returning. The courage to let the void be a room, not a verdict. If this reaches you now, it isn't a warning that something is about to fall apart. It's recognition that something has already shifted, and the only thing that would truly hurt you is pretending it hasn't. You don't need certainty to let a chapter end. You need the steadiness to stop holding the door open for a version of yourself that no longer fits inside that room, because the next life cannot enter while the past is still being kept on standby.